I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about how the body responds when you change your diet. And you don't always see what the long-term outcome is going to be when you get into something new. So you might find that if you transition from a mainstream diet to a plant-based diet, initially you have really great results because what you've shifted to eating has so much more nutritional value, more life force, more water content, and flows through the body a lot more readily, and starts to activate some of that old stuff that accumulated in the body, making you feel so much better. And that's great, but there are times when then you have to know that it's time to upgrade again. It's one thing to initiate a better course, a better direction, but if you don't take into consideration that some of the things that you've brought into your diet may not be ideal, even though they worked in the short term because they were better than what you were eating, you may wind up having a less than satisfactory experience in the longer term. So reevaluate really frequently. Say, is this working for me? Am I feeling consistently better? Do I feel like I'm making progress, even if it's not huge by leaps and bounds, but at least incremental progress. Sometimes what happens with people is they have great results in the beginning, and then because they're not fully acknowledging where some of these improvements might not be ideal for the body at large over the long term, they'll start to go backward a bit, but they'll think, wait a minute, let me just keep with it because it worked for me in the beginning, so naturally it was good, it was right. Don't fall into that trap. If things aren't working, you must reconsider. There's no good in continuing something if it's not working. Doesn't mean you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Doesn't mean that you change course dramatically. It means that you need to be a little bit more precise about the choices you're making on that course. So, for example, you've taken on a vegan diet, and you were eating mainstream foods before. And in the beginning, the vegan diet was working so brilliantly. You lost 15 pounds, your skin cleared up dramatically, you had so much more energy, you were feeling so much happier and more inspired. And then 6 months later, you're actually feeling a little bit groggy, a little bit bloated, your skin is acting up, and things aren't great. Well, then you've got to think, well, where could these symptoms be coming from? Fermentation and pimples. These things all they are indicative of inflammation in the body and a blocked colon and pathogens meandering through the body, finding their way to the skin, because the skin is the largest organ, but the second largest eliminative organ. The intestine is the largest eliminative organ. When the intestine is full and blocked, it passes it on to its friend, the skin, and its backup and says, I can't take this. Can you take it for me, please? So all that waste then also, remember that it gets passed on to the skin, but also the whole body is permeable. It's porous, and everything passes from one place to the next, from one cell through the next. This porousness is ideal, and it's ideally designed for conductivity. It enables there to be a transmission of the good things. Unfortunately, it also provides channels for things that are not ideal. Better, though, that it can move these non-ideal things out and through than keep them in one place, though, because if you keep them in one place, then you have one thing that's suffering so acutely that might not be heard until it's too late. So it's an ingenious design to have this porous permeability occurring in the body, and having it's a great strength at large, but it will mean that you'll have symptoms that that you might not understand. So remember that your body's always speaking to you. It speaks in the form of pleasure, and it speaks in the form of pain. When things are genuinely working, pleasure is you wake up, I feel great. You have a fabulous day, your organs are functioning beautifully, you're having great eliminations, you're breathing deeply, your joints are mobile, you're just feeling fluid. That's what pleasure means in terms of the body's communication. Pain is symptoms. It's, I can't move that well, I feel depressed, I'm not sleeping well, I'm not waking up energized, I'm having unfavorable cosmetic symptoms. All of these things. Wrinkly skin. Our skin is going to reflect our intestine. A dry intestine is going to be reflected in very, very dry, crinkly, wrinkly skin. So this is why I have no fear about getting older. I'm 45 this year, and I don't feel like I have the skin of a 45-year-old. And I believe strongly, I know that it's because my water content, my fluid content is so high, and my residue content, the remains of waste, is so low, almost, well, it's negligible. So if we don't have waste sitting in the body, then we don't have rot. That waste is always going to be rot. So the extent to which you are displacing your life force to hold and host rot is the extent to which you're going to reflect that rot on the outside. And also energetically and emotionally and mentally and all these things. It's so easy to be chill and happy when your body is in flow and having, so the pleasure doesn't just express physically, it expresses on all these different levels. By the same token, you might have switched from a plant-based diet to a meat-based diet because you heard that that was the thing to do because of all these reasons that, you know, some of these so-called authorities have shifted their perspective on plant-based diet after doing it for so long and touting the virtues of it. And so you get on the bandwagon, you're like, well, it hasn't actually been working for me, the plant-based diet. Again, because, not because it's just because the way you were executing it was misguided. If it wasn't working for you, that's why. But then, you know, to flip the switch and go go in the opposite direction is also going to be misguided. But you might have a kind of beginner's luck, a kind of positive experience at first because the body's getting a relief from what wasn't working. And in the context of a meat-based diet, you're going to have a very low water content, very contractive kind of food going into you, whereas the plant-based diet was very expansive. So don't take it for granted that just because that meat-based diet made you suddenly feel so much leaner and more energized temporarily, that's going to be the case over the long term. It won't over the long term. Over the long term, you're taking in the vibration of death. You're going to be basically a vessel for pathogens. You will be taking in more and more rot. Dead animal flesh, it rots. That's what happens. In 98.6 degrees, the human body is the Arizona desert. It's going to cause that waste matter to sit there and rot and become so noxious and because it's so acidic and because the human tissue is alkaline, it's going to magnetize into the tissue as it dehydrates. That's why there's such a huge accumulation in the body after even just a decade of consuming these unfit foods, of consuming acidic foods. It doesn't matter if they're acidic because they're cow's milk or because they're animal flesh or because they're white flour and sugar, candy corns and M&Ms. It's all the same. It's acidic waste, and it's going to stick in the tissue and make it impossible for your tissue to flow and breathe, which is what it's dying to do. It's like if you can imagine, if you were a cell in a body that was consuming these things, you would be suffocated, and then you would just be there and stuck and immobilized and unable to regenerate, unable to do your thing. So let your cells do their thing. Listen closely. Listen to how your body's communicating to you. Pay attention to the signals. There is a book of life, and you know, people will say, oh, well, you know, here we are as humans, but, you know, no one ever gave us a blueprint for living, or nobody ever gave us a textbook for life. That's nonsense. Of course you have a textbook for life. Just look around you. Nature's your textbook. The reactions, the cause and effect, it's everywhere. You just have to pay attention. And when you embrace that and you learn the language, you become fluent. You become literate in this language, then you can read the book of life and it can all make sense, and you will be liberated. You won't have to look toward so-called authorities. You'll become your own master, and that's where your sovereignty lies, which is actually where your true freedom lies. So that's the best direction I can give you, and I hope it serves you well.